Hello, I'm Donal McCauley, and welcome to this Medics Voices conversation where we talk to the key opinion leaders in health and medicine around the world. Today we're in Canada and I'm talking to Suzanne Strasberg. Suzanne, now you're chair of the board of directors of the Canadian Medical Association, which is a very high profile role, but let's take you back to the very beginning. Let's take you back to what inspired you because your parents were medical.
That's true. My father was a professor of surgery at the University of Toronto and Washington University in St. Louis, and my mom was a registered nurse who worked at Women's College Hospital on the floor for years, and then did clinical trials in diabetes as a diabetes education nurse.
Well, was medicine always written in the stars?
No, I thought I was going to be the first female judge for the Court of Canada. And when I was young, my parents had a lawyer friend who was very influential and took me downtown. He was a Queen's Counsel and took me downtown to Osgoode Hall and showed me around. And but then when I was about 14 or 15, my mom said, I think you really want to be a doctor. And that really kind of stuck with me. And I decided I did want to be a doctor. And I loved every second of being a family doctor and being a physician, and truly thought it was an honor and a privilege, and did whatever I could to try and convince my daughter to also go into medicine. But she had her own mind, much to my chagrin, and chose to do a PhD in chemistry. So still science, but not medicine.
So tell us about medical school, because coming from a background, a professor of surgery, to family medicine, did medical school influence that direction?
Well, actually, I was in a program to be a plastic surgeon, and I had done 2 years of research at with a woman who was quite inspirational, Susan McKinnon. She was involved in one of the first peripheral nerve transplants. I did 2 years in her lab, and to be honest, I was trying to get pregnant and couldn't get pregnant. And my dad always said to me, "Only do surgery if it's the only thing that'll make you happy." It was the only thing that made him happy. But it wasn't the only thing that made me happy. So I decided with my husband that I wasn't going to pursue that career and be 33 or 34 when I finished, and went back to Toronto from St. Louis and started a practice with someone that I was introduced to, and had a fantastic career in family medicine in Toronto, working in a fairly indigent practice in Toronto in an area called Jane and Finch. And again, loved every second of it. The patients were just wonderful, and it was a real privilege to be able to work there.
Well, you've talked about your practice, but you had another interesting partner because it's your sister, I believe.
I have a sister, that's true, who also is in family medicine, and she is now, I left the practice about 2 years ago and just am doing part-time work in the Niagara region. I moved from Toronto, and she, along with one of the associates in my office, took over running the practice, and they're running a practice with a total of 9 physicians and about 18,000 patients, still in the same location at Jane and Finch. It was great to work with Jessica.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about your own family medicine background and what interested you in family medicine.
Um, I like the idea of being able to look after generations of the same family, and certainly in my practice, I had the opportunity to look after sometimes 4 generations of the same family. I love the variety of the work. I love that, it was cradle to grave. I love that you could do work outside the office, so you could work and emerge, which I did. I was a clinical associate working on the floors at Sick Kids in Toronto when I started. I did surgical assisting. So that, you could kind of reinvent yourself all the time, and you weren't doing the same thing all the time. And I love the interactions with patients. You really were able to establish long-term really important relationships. And, even to this day, my sister will say to me, I saw one of your patients and they said to say hello. So it's really, it was really great.
Now, you had an interest in cancer care.
I did. I think that that's one of the things that family medicine allowed. So I had kind of a bit of a career, I would say, outside my main clinical career as a family doctor. I was the provincial lead for Cancer Care Ontario, and I did that for about 6 years. And there was 14 regions that the province was divided up into, and there was a regional lead. And there were also Aboriginal health cancer leads. And so we all worked together in trying to advance the health of the people who lived in Ontario. And I had an opportunity to move us to work on the program that moved us from screening using fecal occult blood tests to fecal immunochemical tests. I had the opportunity to be part of the development of the high risk lung cancer screening program, part of the work that moved us from doing traditional cytology pap smears to HPV testing, work with mammography. And I have quite a history of cancer in my family. My mother had breast cancer. My sister that I mentioned had breast cancer at 35. Um, we for sure have a gene that's undiscovered. So I had quite a bit of interest in that work, and it was challenging. And I got to work with a really really smart people, and that was a great opportunity.
Well, you were clearly very immersed in clinical care and in the care of your patients. And then you took another diversion because you're involved in, I suppose, the politics, the administration. Tell us how that began and how that developed.
Well, uh, that started because in about 1996 we had our first NDP government. Bob Rae was the premier. And at that time, they decided that because of deficits in the provincial budget, they would claw back 10% of all physician billings. And that made me a bit unhappy. So I, along with two women, Rochelle Schwartz and Charlotte Lickman, and a number of other people met in a small room at North York General Hospital, and we decided to start a group called the Coalition of Family Physicians. And we all put in $100 each to establish the group, and I went and opened a bank account and got the letters patent. And I was the secretary because I opened the bank account, and for a while I was doing the ledgers by hand, and I was always out a few pennies here and there. And eventually we got enough money from physicians around the province at $100 each to get a bookkeeper. But I have to give the Charlotte and Rochelle so much credit. They took so much time away from the practice, and they were very inspiring. A lot of people joined, and a lot of people gave up their time. We would meet in people's basements, once every 2 weeks. We would send out newsletters, print them out, and lick the envelopes and stamp them, on a Sunday night and mail them the next day. And eventually, one of the physicians uh, got fax numbers for doctors in the province, and he was able to send faxes 24 hours a day. The fax machine was running to get our information out. And then around 2003, we decided it was better to try and get inside the OMA tent because they had all the money. And so we ran three board directors in the Toronto area. There were three spots, and 8 people ran, and we came one, two, three. So that was really the start of my medical political career.
So tell us how that progressed because you then were chair of the Ontario Medical Association.
Yeah, I joined the board, and there were a lot of very interesting issues going on. And at that time, there was a lot of issues going on around primary care reform. And so I got involved in that. And one of the main primary care models was that still exists today. It's something called the Family Health Organization, or we call it a FO, and it's a capitated model with a small mix of fee for service. And I was one of the co-chairs with the ministry in developing that, along with some other directors at the OMA that had significant experience and were very valuable in terms of their expertise. And after 2 years, I decided to run for the executive. And so I was elected by my peers at the board. And the way that worked is once you got onto the executive, you rotated through various positions. So you were the secretary, and then the treasurer, and then the chair of the board. Then you were the president-elect, the president, and then the past president, and then you stepped off the board. So that's how it worked. I was the chair for a year. And it was a great experience because it was very challenging. We had a board of, I think, 25 people. And in those days, you had large boards, and that was took some learning to be able to manage a board of that size and to listen to people and still get the issues dealt with in a timely way and get through your agenda.
So then, after Ontario Medical Association, you got involved with the wider CMA.
Yeah, that's true. After the Ontario Medical Association, I was chair of something called the PTMA Forum. So 3 times a year, the CMA would bring together the presidents and CEOs of the 12 provincial medical associations and the 2 territorial medical associations, and we would talk about issues of common interest. And I chaired that. Um, I also chaired something actually before I was on the CMA board that looked at the interface between public and private medicine. At the time, we had a president of the CMA named Brian Day, who felt very strongly that the Canadian healthcare system was not providing the care in a timely way, and so we looked at that. And then once I finished as the PTMA chair, um, I joined MD Financial, and MD Financial was a wholly owned subsidiary of the Canadian Medical Association. It started as a small mail-in mutual fund company, I think in the 60s. And I sat on that board for a few years, and then I became the chair of that board. And then in 2019, we sold it to Scotiabank for $3 billion. And at that time, it was the largest wealth management company outside the 5 big banks in Canada. So that was also a really very interesting experience. The board was made up of maybe half physicians and half people who really knew about running a wealth management company. And working with the CEO, Brian Peters, was a really outstanding opportunity, and the executive leadership team was excellent. So I learned a lot there.
Well, MD Financial, it was an enormous financial organization, which many of our listeners really wouldn't have a feel for because it's so different to other medical societies. So just give us a little bit of background of what MD Financial did for doctors.
Sure. Well, at the beginning, as I said, if you're a member of the Canadian Medical Association, you had an opportunity to purchase in the early days what we consider traditional mutual funds. Um, After that, they had a whole lot of different offerings, and they had a a priority lens on learners and helping them understand debt and helping them get a line of credit at really good rates so that they could afford to pay for medical school. They ran seminars on how to establish a practice, a little bit about billing, although billing is different in every province. Again, there were different ways you could invest. They had advisors. Um, uh, for the most of the time I was there, you would have had an advisor who helped you, would understand what your risk tolerance was, what your goals for retirement were, and they were not commission based. They were paid a salary. So there was never ever a conflict in terms of any of the advice that they provided to the physician. The advice that they provided the physician was always 100% in the best interest of the physician. So that would have been very different. And then later on, they had some specific offerings for clients that had a bit more money than when you started out, and they started to offer things that you might not be able to get on your own, like access to BlackRock and private equity offerings. And when we sold it to Scotia, we had about $50 billion in assets under management. So quite a lot. It was a big wealth management firm.
It's an eye-watering amount of money, which many medical associations are scraping together. CMA must be one of the wealthiest after that sale.
Absolutely. I think we probably are the wealthiest not-for-profit in Canada. And the CEO at the time, Tim Smith, really by having the insight to look at selling the wealth management company at a time when there was a lot of fintech coming in and banks were putting a lot of money into that, and the CMA couldn't do that. Really helped establish the CMA as an organization that'll live on in perpetuity and be able to uh, move forward in areas that we might not have moved forward, and change the focus a little bit so that the focus of the CMA is about the profession, about health, about healthcare, and about the health system.
Well, now, before we move on to your role as chair, let's talk about this extra qualification you did, because you did a qualification to become a director. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I did that quite late, but now you take well, you don't have to take, but it seems to be a gold standard, at least in Canada, to get your ICD designation, independent corporate director, and that's done through Rotman, and it's 4 2-day meetings, educational seminars over a year. It's quite interactive. It talks about everything from governance, regulatory issues, IT, cybersecurity, and then you go through a lot of cases or issues that have come up, and directors, like they call them, director dilemmas, where there could be a case of wrongdoing by the CEO or someone on the board, or something someone had said, and how that was managed, and how the outcome came, and what you would do in that situation, or what you would recommend. And uh, there were a lot of really great speakers, and the group was very diverse. Some were from management, some were from boards of directors. Some had never taken, were neither, but wanted the education for a variety of reasons. When I was there, we had an MP from the Liberal government there, so it was quite interesting.
So let's move on a little bit and tell us about the process of becoming the chair of the board of directors of CMA.
Okay. Well, there's a call that went out, and any of the members of the CMA um, can apply. At the time, there were many members, about 75,000. There was a search committee that put their that was hired by the CMA. I guess people put their applications in, and there was a short list, and the um, people from the company would called and asked you some questions, and then if they thought that you were qualified, they shortlisted you. And so I got shortlisted, and there was an interview. I actually was in the Caribbean sailing with my husband and flew back from it. It was something that he wanted to kill me for, and still remembers. But I flew back from it, and I for it, and had an interview, and the interview went well. And by the time I landed in St. Vincent, I had a call from the chair of the search committee who said I got the position. So I was pretty happy about it. It's been challenging and difficult at sometimes, and but mostly rewarding. And again, got to work with a fantastic CEO and executive leadership team, great people around the board table. Also quite challenging because still a large board, 18 people, and the board changes over by about a quarter to a third every year. And so every year you're having to bring people up to speed, which is a bit of a challenge, especially when you're developing and implementing on a strategic plan because people are coming in at different times. But again, it was a very nice experience. It's almost over. I'm done August 21st.
For most, dare I say, ordinary doctors, now that's really not the right term to use, but for most members of CMA, the role of chair of the board of directors is very distant. So
Yes.
just give them a little flavor of the types of challenges and things that you face in every day.
Um, so I'm not the spokesperson of the organization. The spokesperson of the organization is the president. So they deal with the speaking to the press. They have an online presence through social media. They would deal with the crises of the day, things around, let's say, the pandemic or access to care, physician burnout. They would be speaking about that. My job is really to represent the board, to be the interface between the board and the CEO, who is our only employee, um, to make sure that the board gets the materials that they need in order to make informed decisions and discharge their fiduciary responsibilities in a timely way, make sure they have enough information, the right information, and feel like they've had an opportunity to talk and express their views and come to a decision that they're comfortable with. My major I did a I have a number of responsibilities. I sit on the finance committee, the human resources committee. Um, um, there's one more, the governance committee, of course. And but my main responsibility, I would say, that I had was to help develop and implement on our strategic plan, which we call Impact 2040. And I did that obviously in conjunction with the board, but really with management, and specifically a woman named Allison Seymour, who was the executive lead, and her team.
Now, Suzanne, you teed me up for the next question because you said you've coming to the end of your tenure. So the obvious question is, what are you going to do next?
Oh, what am I going to do next? Not too much. I think that almost 30 years in medical politics is enough. I would love to sit on another board if I had an opportunity, but I'm not sure that I have the skill set outside of medical organizations necessarily to sit on another board. I'm going to continue to do locums a couple of days a week in the Niagara region when I'm in Ontario. In the winter, my husband and I go skiing in British Columbia, and we have a boat share on a sailboat, which I think we'll probably keep at least one more year for 3 weeks in the Caribbean, and we go sailing together. I have a daughter who's at school in California, so go out and see her. And my parents are both alive and still elderly, and are elderly and living in Toronto, and want to spend some time with them and my siblings who I'm close to in Toronto.
So as my final question, let me bring you back to the prospective law student at 14 or 15. What would she think of your career?
Well, I think she would have thought that I made the absolute right choice. There's a lot of physicians who are having some difficulties, that are feeling burnt out, that are feeling underappreciated. I personally never felt that, although I understand why they feel it. I never did. I was fortunate to take advantage of all the opportunities that the Ontario Medical Association negotiated with physicians, for family physicians. I think I came in at the right time. I had a fantastic practice with a great partner, um, outstanding patients, and I really had found a lot of joy in medicine. So I think she would have thought I made the right decision.
Suzanne, thank you very much for taking us through what's been an incredible journey to think of all those different roles. Thank you very much for your inspiration and for sharing so much of that with us today. Thank you very much indeed.